All right, this presentation is going to be a little bit longer than what we've done in the past, but that's okay. We've got a lot to cover. I'm going to try to blow through it as fast as I can without leaving out some good detail. But buckle in, we can get this done. We're going to learn some stuff. We're going to talk about the inventions and the inventors of the Industrial Revolution, who they were, who the major people were, and what were the major inventions that we remember so well and were so highly influential. The first one is the telegraph of 1837. That's a little bit before the Industrial Revolution here, but it leads to the transatlantic cable. I bring these things in because this technology, nothing blossoms out of, a new invention doesn't blossom out of nowhere. They are influenced by existing inventions, and this is something that helps influence other inventions that come on later, things like the telephone and things. Now, the telegraph, one of the coolest things about this was with the telegraph, for the first time in human history, we could have almost instantaneous communication across hundreds and hundreds of miles. You couldn't just telegraph right into somebody's home or necessarily speak to an individual, but you could go from station to station, and if somebody wanted to receive a message, boom, it was right there, and you could communicate almost instantly with them. The transatlantic cable, within 30 years of the telegraph being invented, somebody said, let's extend this not just across a continent, but what if we took this thing all the way across the ocean? And it was incredibly ambitious for its day, absolutely ambitious. And they stretched it from North America under the Atlantic Ocean, under the surface of the ocean, deep enough that that it wouldn't interfere with the cable, and they went all the way across the ocean into Europe, and truly amazing. Now we can communicate in North America with Europe almost instantaneously. Absolutely mind-boggling for the time. Now, during the Industrial Revolution, Thomas Edison, we can't speak about inventions or inventors without speaking about him first. He really is the most famous inventor of the Industrial Revolution. If you've never seen a picture of Thomas Edison, now you say you can. Thomas Edison, the things he was most famous for in 1877 was the phonograph. Now, when we say the phonograph, think of the modern day record player. It was not close at all in technology, but the ideas were similar. You had a grooved surface with a needle that wrote on that grooved surface, and sounds would then be emitted from that. And that you would then, regardless of how it worked, the coolest thing was, for the first time in human history, you could listen to music and you didn't have to listen to it live. It could be recorded, and you could be at your house and you could listen to music as much as you wanted to or whenever you wanted to. It was really a game-changing, freeing technology that people had. And this was the very first time that it ever happened. In 1879, you have the electric light bulb. It's hard for me to even state how important the electric light bulb was, because not only was it a technology, it wasn't just for entertainment. This changes the way that people live and work. You can beat the darkness, essentially, and you can work at night instead of just only during daylight hours. When you're at home, you can stay up and you can read. You don't have to rely on oil lamps anymore to have a light in the evening. Well, without electricity, you can't run an electric light bulb. So within a year of the light bulb, Edison launches a power distribution system, basically power lines. They go from generators, power generators, coal, we use those today, coal and hydroelectric, but from where it's generated, and it gets distributed to people's homes and to businesses. And then in 1891, you have the motion picture projector, which has been a cultural game changer, because now with movies, we transmit ideas, we educate, we share values. It's incredible, the medium that the movie projector has, the value that the movie projector has offered. I do have a short video on Thomas Edison. We're going to watch him real quick.
1879, Menlo Park, New Jersey, 51 kilometers from New York. Thomas Edison, inventor, entrepreneur, showman. He was taken out of school as a boy, but that won't stop him from becoming synonymous with inventions that define the modern era. He pushes his team hard, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one of the world's first research laboratories, generating over 1,000 patents. The world still lights the night in the dangerous flicker of candles, gas, and kerosene. Edison has a better idea. If he can get a filament to burn slowly in a vacuum, The electric light bulb.
Platinum.
Edison locks himself in his lab, doesn't sleep for days. The stakes are high. His backers have sunk $130,000 into his research, millions in today's money.
He claimed to have gone through 6,000 materials from the plant world alone in his search for the perfect filament.
Torrid lamp jack. Spruce. Beard. Fish line. Thread. Teak. Boxwood. Celluloid. Parchment.
Then something extraordinary happens.
Cardboard.
A piece of carbonized cardboard burns for 300 hours. It's going to change the way people live forever.
What Edison does is nothing less than to banish the darkness. Now think of the meaning of that. Think of what that means to daily life.
New Year's Eve, 1879. Edison shows off his new invention. Thousands of people flock to his lab. The Pennsylvania Railway arranges special trains to accommodate the crowds.
When Thomas Edison invented that light bulb, that electric light bulb, how magical that must have been. You know, to sit there and just all of a sudden, like without a match or without kerosene or gas, and just flip a switch and light.
In just 2 years, Edison builds more than 5,000 power stations, generating electricity for cities like New York, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, and New Orleans. Over the next 5 years, he builds over 127,000 more. By 1902, 18 million light bulbs are in use. The impact on America is massive. Sports venues, factories, and shops all can now operate at night.
So that is Thomas Edison. Next inventor that I want to talk to is one that we've talked about before, is Henry Ford. Now, you remember he did not invent the car. He did not invent the internal combustion engine. He did not invent the assembly line. But what he did was he brought these things together and made them incredibly efficient, so much that he could produce a car that the common man could purchase. And on top of that, he paid his workers twice the rate that other companies were paying, other industries were paying. So he, by paying his employees more, he was creating customers as well. So he really was quite revolutionary. And all we have to do is look around and see how revolutionary, I keep using that word, but how impactful the car has been on the global economy, but particularly for us. So Henry Ford, big inventor, taking all the technology that was there and making something super cool like the Model T. The Wright brothers, we have not talked about these guys before. 1903, two brothers, they own a bicycle shop, they build an airplane. They're not the first ones to try to do this. This has been around for centuries. But what they did that was so unique was they did the world's first motorized flight, human flight. And their flight itself wasn't that impressive. If we looked at it today, it wouldn't be that impressive. It lasted for just a matter of seconds. But it set the stage that people said, yes, this is possible. We are beginning to understand of how flight, the mechanics of flight, how that could possibly work. And they did their experiment at Kitty Hawk in North Carolina. And that set new ground. It's interesting today, we don't think anything about flying. It's so cheap to fly now. If I want to fly to cross country, it's cheaper for me to fly than it is for me to drive my car. And we don't think twice about me jumping in this metal tube. I go down to a building called an airport, I buy a ticket, I get on this metal tube called an airplane. It takes off at hundreds of miles an hour off the ground. I'm in there with a couple hundred people at least. We get up in the air, we're flying hundreds of miles, 600 miles an hour we're flying in the air, and I have somebody standing up and serving me drinks and snacks. It's absolutely incredible, and that happens within 100 years after the first human flight, but that was the Wright brothers. The next one I want to talk about is one that he does get ignored quite a bit. Nikola Tesla. It's arguably he was the brightest scientist that the world has ever known. If you've never heard of Nikola Tesla, that is why we're talking about him today. That is a picture of him. He was a strange guy, incredibly brilliant, absolutely just mind-bogglingly brilliant. He was born in Croatia. He immigrated to the U.S., and he actually worked for Thomas Edison for some time. He invented the following: the fluorescent lighting, the lighting fixtures that are in our rooms today. The AC electrical supply, this is what's used for our homes and our businesses today. Edison wanted the DC system, which your cars run off of today. But Tesla invented the AC electrical supply. And of course, the radio. And here we got examples of these. There was another inventor by the name of Marconi that often is credited with the radio, but it actually was Tesla himself who invented the radio. So think about these things that we have. You have lighting today, you have plug-ins, and of course radio. That's just everywhere. That's absolutely everywhere. And anyway, that is Nikola Tesla. Alexander Graham Bell, he invented the first functioning telephone. It's interesting because part of his ambition, or not his ambition, but maybe his drive, was that his wife was deaf. So he was constantly looking for hearing devices that would help people hear better. He thought the phone, actually the invention of the phone, he thought it was a distraction after he invented it. And he would not even have one installed in his study because it bothered him so much. So think about this. If you like to put your phone away when you work, which I hope you do, and I hope when you're doing your homework you don't have it up and you don't have Twitter and Facebook and everything else up, he's along that same line. He said, nah, it's a distraction for me. When I'm working, I want to work. So Alexander Graham Bell, you're the man. Way to set the example. Anyway, Alexander Graham Bell, telephone. The skyscraper and elevator, this changes a lot of things. Particularly you see this in the cities, and this you're limited to how tall you can build a building because the walls on the outside normally are what hold the building up, and those are weight-bearing walls. But if you have a structure, a skeleton that's built with steel, a framework, now you can go multiple stories, and now that had never been able to be accomplished before. So I'm going to show you a quick little video on the skyscraper, and then of course the elevator that has to be invented, because if you have something that is 30, 40, 50 stories high, you have to be able to deliver supplies and goods more than just the stairs. So the elevator piggybacks off of the invention of the skyscraper.
New York is a playground for the super-rich industrialists and financiers. Wildly extravagant, they smoke cigars rolled in $100 bills. Their wives' hats studded with diamonds. Land values are the highest in the world. There's only one place to go: up. By 1902, 65 skyscrapers are being constructed in Manhattan. This is one of them. It's called Walking the Steel. This man is 30 stories above the street. His first time at this height. No harness or safety rope. One slip, and he's dead. Veterans are called fixers. The novices are snakes, because working with them can be deadly. The old hands know just how dangerous it can be.
Thing I hate worse than poison is to take on a new man when we're near the top. They all get used to it or get killed.
No hard hats, just an 85-meter drop. They're up here 8 hours a day, meals when they can, no toilet breaks. They're called roughnecks, European immigrants and Mohawk Indians. Many were sailors and bridge workers, so they're used to heights.
The guys balancing on the beams. I think it took a lot of bravery. I think it took a lot of skill, a lot of physically challenging. But I also think you had to be a little crazy.
The stakes couldn't be higher. It's a risk they're willing to take. The pay is $4 a day, twice the going rate for manual labor. Foreman William Starrett sums up this dangerous job.
Building skyscrapers is the nearest peacetime equivalent of war. Even to the occasional grim reality of an accident or a maimed body, even death, remind us that we are fighting a war of construction against the forces of nature.
He makes it. Many aren't so lucky. 2 roughnecks out of 5 die or are disabled on the job.
Whether it's a builder or an architect or whatever, whoever had the imagination to design and build some of the great structures of New York, I'm inspired by.
In 1902, in New York, this is what the future looks like. The Flatiron Building, its triangular footprint determined by the junction of 3 streets. The steel frame means the outside can be hung in sections, like a suit of clothes. Now the walls don't take the weight, the steel does. It's so radical, when people first see it, they think it will blow over and kill them. Legal action is taken claiming winds focused by the Flatiron's extreme shape damaged a nearby shop. Today, it's one of America's best-loved buildings. Inside, the other breakthrough that lets towers rise into the clouds. The lift. Before it, the tallest buildings stopped mostly at 5 floors. No more walking upstairs now, so the sky is the limit. For the first time, the higher the floor, the higher the rent.
You think it's a fairly humble invention, but when Otis invented the first really safe elevator, it enabled the growth of the modern city where people could come in, build much taller buildings, get a much higher density of people.
And sure enough, by the end of the 19th century, America's urban population has increased 87 times over. In Chicago alone, in just 10 years, they build 50 steel-frame buildings. And in 20 years, its population more than doubles to almost 1.7 million.
So the skyscraper and the elevator are going to transform city life. City life will never, ever be the same. And the cityscapes will never, ever look the same anymore. And you can imagine how majestic of a city New York City itself must have been, because now you come into the harbor and it doesn't just have 4 or 5 story buildings anymore. It has high rises unlike any other place in the world. So we've gone through quite a bit here today. The important thing about this, regardless of what invention you think was most important or what inventor was most influential, one thing is for sure, life was forever changed because of the inventors and the inventions of the Industrial Revolution. There you go. Good job. You hung in there. That was a long presentation. Pat yourself on the back. I hope you took good notes, because we got some assignments and a quiz coming up.